Hello and welcome to episode 41 of Intruder, Theatre in the Making or Screenplay in the Making. That's what I'm focusing on in this podcast episode, Screenplay. I talked a little bit about it in episode 40 and also I'll be talking about it in episode 41. Just documenting me adapting my solo play into a screenplay. So sharing some insight, maybe tips, what I've learned with people who maybe are at the same stage that I am and trying to write a screenplay based on their play or a completely new screenplay. I normally talk about my play, but in 2023 I started thinking of developing a screenplay based on the play, and I'm now focusing, I'm recording a couple of episodes on it. So that's what's going to happen in episode 41. My name is Remi Rachuba and thank you so much for tuning in. Now in episode 40 I looked at 2023 and the journey and talked about what inspired me, which filmmakers inspired me to, for the play to have a structure as it is, but also talked about a little bit of researching and maybe thinking of writing the screenplay. I didn't really focus much on the practical side of things because that's what's coming in this podcast episode. However, if you want to listen to that episode and have continuity, please check out episode 40. So I'm jumping into episode 41, and at the end of episode 40 what I talked about was that I was to go to the premiere of an animation, a short film that I did a voiceover for, and that was a bear named Wojtek. The premiere was to take place in Edinburgh in 2023, and also around the same time I found out that Richard Gadd, who is in Baby Reindeer, a hugely successful series on Netflix, was part of the animation. I had been trying to get hold of Richard for quite some time, but I couldn't. So then I learned that the premiere is taking place, and I thought, wow, since it's the premiere, so I'm going to meet Richard and I can ask him some questions about the series and make contact, because I really wanted to contact him to get some advice and tips how he went about writing his series. So when I went to the premiere in Edinburgh, Richard wasn't there. And that's the end of the story, to be quite honest. I didn't really, I was trying to get hold of him before, but then since he didn't come to the series, to the premiere, of the short film, I concluded, I probably wouldn't meet him. Now, in hindsight, I think that he was working on his series in post-production. That was in Edinburgh in August 2023. The series came out April 2024. So, yeah, he must have been busy. But then I didn't think that it had a lot of impact on what I was going to do, because it was also around that time, kind of end of August, that I was thinking, I really just need to get on it. meaning writing the script. And I think that's really the best way to do things. I just like to do things. I don't want to really dwell on things for too long, because if I didn't meet him, it's fine. I just need to get on with my story, and that's what happened. So when I came back from Edinburgh, as I said, it was the end of August. I wrote a couple of pages of the script, but it was only at the beginning of September where I decided to actually write and submit my script to the submission windows that were available. I talked about submission windows in the previous episode, so I'm not really talking much about it. BBC Pilot, the deadline was the end of September, and I needed to submit 50 pages. So then nearly the whole September I wrote 50 pages, a lot of work. So I just remember that in September I wrote all the time. Of course, we need to remember that I was working. I work as an interpreter, so I travel quite a lot, and I brought my MacBook everywhere because I knew that I needed to just type it in. September, all the time, weekends, Saturdays, Sundays, I went to the library and I spent writing because I just knew that I needed to submit the 50 pages. Now, it was quite an interesting process. So how I went about it, I will maybe share some insight and how I felt about it. So I knew that there is screenwriting software, there is screenwriting apps where people write screenplays. I knew of the Final Draft. I knew that there is an app called Celts, that there is Studio Binder. I knew of them. However, I didn't want to pay for them. Some of them, they have a monthly subscription and you pay, I think, £10 or maybe £20, depending on what kind of plan you want. And I'll talk about it a little bit later on. I wasn't really sure how it was going to go, so yeah, I went for G Drive, Gmail, email. They have a format, screenwriting format, and the layout. So I thought, okay, I'll use it from now on, and I won't worry about the software, and I don't have to pay for it. So that's what I started doing. All the scenes, everything I was writing was on Gmail Drive in that document, which, it said that it had a layout of a screenplay. However, it was when I started printing the document, then I saw that the layout didn't look like, it did look like a screenplay, but then the margins were too wide, and I'm not really sure whether probably I did something wrong or I set it up incorrectly. It looked like a screenplay, but you could tell that something was not right. So in hindsight, I think had I known that, I would have gone for the proper screenwriting software right away, which I did in the end, but that was around January 2024. So when I started writing the screenplay in September 23, it took me about 6 months to realize and it was also someone else's advice that, yeah, maybe the software would be the right thing to do. Now, when I look at it, all my drafts are on the Celts, and Celts, they had a plan where you can have different, 3 drafts of a screenplay. I didn't know anything about it. I just thought that, I only can have 1 draft. But then when I signed up for the plan, it turned out that I can have 3 different drafts for, I think, £9 a month. £9, it really depends on your budget. If you can afford £9 a month and spend some time on it and edit your draft, I think it's quite easy. It's quite practical thing to have, especially as you can set it up in a particular way. You can make some arrangements and make it easy for yourself, to be quite honest. And then 1 draft, you can treat it as different notes, and 1 draft you can have as your draft of the screenplay. And also, I'm looking into writing. Well, I was looking into writing a Polish version of the screenplay. Not at that time, but that's what happened. So I would recommend, if someone is maybe looking into screenwriting, to look into different screenwriting software and consider going for a plan. And they also have a trial period, so you can see whether it works for you or not. I went with Celts a little bit later on, but at the very beginning I was using Drive or Gmail Drive, the layout over there, and it worked for me. It was fine. It was only later on that I knew that the layout of the print wasn't right, and I'm only talking about it because I know that when people receive screenplays and it looks a little bit different from normal, then, it's not industry standards, then people may not potentially think, it's not a professionally written script, if the layout is completely different from what they normally read. So that's another reason why I would go for a professional screenwriting software. At that time, I didn't really take it into consideration. Now I would have. So I was writing it there, and I actually, as I said, spent quite a lot of time, a month, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I actually wrote 80 pages of the script. For me, comparing playwriting to screenwriting was a little bit different, because when I was working on some other projects during the pandemic, I normally write with my hand. So I take a piece of paper and I just write whatever, whether it's a dialogue, I just go, and then I edit. With the screenplay, I didn't start with my hand. I started doing it on the laptop, maybe because I didn't have loads of time, but still it seemed a little bit less fluent than writing a play, because with the play and it's a dialogue, you just go, it just flows for me. You go, with your hand, la 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 la. Here, you break it into scenes, you set up a scene, and then maybe you write a dialogue. So as I said, it seemed a little bit less fluent. I wouldn't broken to some extent, that I needed to break the rhythm. I don't know, there was something different about it, and stop and think and set it up. I think it's interesting because, when I look at, intruder, I say I'm in Warsaw and I'm at the, Grand Central Station. I say it to the audience, and the audience can imagine that. With the film or screenplay, I need to set it up, so I need to describe what's happening, where I am, and what I'm doing. It's a completely different setup, and I really needed to learn how to do that. That's why I needed to read scripts and find out how others do that. However, the whole process of writing a play and writing a screenplay, completely different. So I knew that I needed to have everything written on the computer. So I was looking at the play, and as I said before, I had my source material, which was great, so I could look at the play and go, okay, now let me just transfer it into a screenplay and see what happens. And that's what I did. I looked at the play and I wrote the scenes that I had in my play, but I also added scenes that were not in the play, extra scenes. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and then at the end of the month I had, as I said, 80 pages, and I submitted to BBC Pilot, and I was really, really very proud of myself. And I think it's important to reward yourselves with something, I often say, good job, Remi, I'm very proud. I'm proud of myself that, I completed a task. I think it's important to to have this feeling of enjoyment and pride that you completed something. So a sense of completion. I think it's key with any projects, creative projects. So when I subbed the 50 pages, it was really time to celebrate, and I felt great that within a short period of time, literally a month, I put my mind to it. I achieved the goal of submitting the screenplay. And then, of course, there was another submission window, BBC Open Call, and then Channel 4. But that was quite straightforward because they only required 30 pages and 20 pages. So when I had the draft of 50 pages, then I sent it to the Polish director that I knew, and they came back to me, I think, 3 weeks later, with some feedback. Of course, it was only the first episode, the first 50 pages, so they didn't know the whole story. What they said to me was that they really liked the world created in it, but because they didn't know the whole story, it was very hard for them to see that enticing incident in the script. So that was really it, and I really took that feedback on board, and I did agree with them, because when I reread the pilot, then I think October or November 2023, I did feel that the story dragged. Like, it was like, okay, come on, Remi, get on with it. So I agreed with them. But I was pleased that they liked the world created in it. but for my first draft, that was great. I really liked what they said in their feedback. So for me, it was a matter of redrafting the 50 pages. I also sent it to other people. Some people responded, some didn't. I sent it to people that I've known for quite some time, who are quite, well, high profile people, and I mean like really like awards and for their films. And some of them came back to me, and I particularly wanted to get some feedback on the writing. However, they came back to me saying, for example, that asking me about the production, or who I'm going to cast in the film, and how is the casting going to work. And I was a little bit confused about that, because I was thinking, why would someone be asking me about the casting if I don't know whether the writing is strong in the script? They didn't really much comment on the writing. They kind of jumped a little bit further on, and they talked about the production. So I was a little bit confused by that. I didn't really know what to think. And I had never before asked those people for feedback. Maybe that's the reason why. I often think that when you go for feedback from someone, it should be someone trusted. I actually recorded a podcast episode where I talked about getting feedback, that it should be from trusted sources rather than just people that you don't know. So that's just a little bit something different. So I just knew that I needed to redraft the 50 pages, and it was November time. So I thought, okay, so I am going to work on the redraft, editing the 50 pages by the end, by the time I go away for Christmas. And I love editing my own material. I don't know, there was something teachery about it. Maybe because I used to be a teacher. I just sit with a highlighter or with a green pen or red pen. I just cross things out. I'm like, no. It's one of my favorite things about doing writing or redrafting, editing my own work. I love it. So that was one thing. And the other thing was, redrafting by a certain moment in time. So as I was saying before in other podcast episodes, I always set up my own personal deadline. So even now I'm going away for Christmas this Friday, and I know that I've got 3 more days to work on the project, and I really want to finish it by the time I go. And that's how I felt last year. I knew that I was going away, and then I wanted to have the draft finished, because when I go away, it's time to rest, holiday, and I don't want to be working on anything, because that should have been done. So that's how I treated it last year, and every time I know there is something coming up, I just want to have this kind of sense of completion, that a project finishes and then a new project starts, and I want to finish something by the time something else starts. So that was ongoing in November and December last year, redrafting the 50 pages that I had. But also another idea came to me at that time. As I highlighted in episode 40, I spoke to a Polish producer about film production briefly. We discussed it, how it works. Not a lot, but just to have some kind of sense of where do you even start. But it wasn't a lot. So then in November 2023, I was thinking, okay, where would I get info on how film productions end up on, for example, Netflix? So I got in touch with George, who helped me quite a lot when I was in Scotland writing. He used to work at the National Theatre of Scotland. He was a literary manager, so I'm still in touch with him, and now he works for a production company in Glasgow. So I emailed him and I asked whether I could send him the pilot, the 50 pages, and George replied and said that really the company only takes material from writing agents. Now, I don't have a writing agent, so although I knew him, well, I couldn't send him anything. So then I was thinking, okay, it's, I could go and ask people here, but I don't have an agent, a writing agent. But then in Poland, there are not many writing agents. It's just production companies. So I could potentially go to a production company and ask them, maybe they could explain to me how things work. But then would people have time to email me and tell me how film production works, what happens, what do you do? I mean, who do I even go to? I mean, where would I even ask? I mean, I do know a couple of film production companies and maybe one person, but then I don't know much. But then asking them how for example, Netflix commissions or sorts things out, well, it was tricky. And then I was thinking about it. It was simmering in my head, this whole idea of, Netflix, Polish production companies ending up on Netflix. So there must be someone at Netflix that commissions the series, or, Polish film production companies must liaise with, for example, Netflix on how, working together. So then I was thinking about it and I thought, well, what if I went to Netflix? Well, they will know. They will tell me how it all works. Rather than going around, why don't I go directly to them? And that was my next step. So how did I go about it? So I thought, well, I don't know anyone at Netflix in Poland, but there must be someone in Europe. There must be. I was doing some research and I thought, well, someone in Europe must be commissioning, I think, certain things, like content director or someone like that. But how do I get hold of them? So then I thought that I knew, that's the wrong word, to be quite honest. I had been in touch with someone from Netflix UK. And how did that come about? So in 2021 or 2022, when I was taking part in loads of writing workshops during the pandemic, I think I read somewhere in the newsletter that I receive every week, Lane's List. It's a brilliant resource for writers, playwrights, I think even screenwriters. It's quite more stuff now for screenwriters. There were some workshops and there was something mentioned about Netflix UK and the person who runs it. And I remember I took notice of that, and I googled that person, and it turned out that that person, when I was in Scotland, worked in Scotland and for BBC Scotland, if I am correct. And they worked with George from, I don't know, George, who I had just mentioned, National Theatre of Scotland, prior to his position at the National Theatre of Scotland. They had worked together. So then, as I googled them, and then I wanted to email them, and it was around that time that I found out, or maybe not yet, that I wanted to tell them about my play in general. I think it might have been 2021. So I emailed that person from Netflix UK, the director. How did I get their email? Well, I did some research. I saw what is the email address for people who work at Netflix. And I just then thought, okay, maybe that's the email address. So I put the name, initials, and actually that email never came back. So I thought, okay, maybe that was the right email address. And then I think a year later, there was another, I think, something else in the newsletter Lane's list, something else, another opportunity, writing opportunity, I think was about screenwriting. And I wasn't sure about it. I had some questions, and that person from Netflix UK, the director, and she was mentioned in it. And then I emailed her just for clarification, and then she responded to me very kindly, and I understood that, oh, okay, that opportunity is not for me. But I also knew, okay, so she read my email. It was very lovely to meet her. So I had that contact. So last year in 2023, when I was thinking about, okay, who I could email to ask about like series in Europe, I thought, okay, I would email Anne. And that's what I did. I briefly told her what I was working on. Well, she had, I guess she might have remembered, because I had emailed her 2 years and a year before, never thinking that I would be emailing her about that. And I asked whether she knew who the person was for if I wanted to ask about film production. And she emailed me, and she only mentioned the name. That was it. Nothing else. She didn't write, hey, Remi. No. She only mentioned the name. And because I had the name and I knew what the pattern for email address at Netflix was, I then emailed that person, and I mentioned that I got an email about that person's email address from Anne, the name, and why I was emailing, and what I had been working on, and whether they would be kind enough to explain to me how Polish series end up on Netflix. And that was, I think, the end of November, beginning of December. And then the person emailed me back, and they said to me, you know what, Remi, great to hear from you. I think it's a very long, it would have been a very long email. Why don't we have a call about it in January? And I was really like surprised that they even emailed me back and wanted to have a call with me. And yes, in December we arranged to have a call in January 2024. Of course, their assistant arranged it, and that took place in January of 2024, and as I just said, yes, so I was very, very excited about that, because that was something to look forward to. But I'm bringing up this story because, I don't have a writing agent. I did write to a couple of agents last year. Nobody really replied to any of my emails. Maybe one or two people. That was really it. But it meant that even without an agent, and even when you email people, you can get a call with someone from a streaming service. It doesn't have to be Netflix. It could be any other services. But I was lucky enough that I wanted to have a call with Netflix, and then because there was a lot of Polish series ending up on Netflix. That's why. But there could be other streaming services that are popular in other countries. But it means that when you ask other people, they can give you some piece of advice or a tip, and nobody really needed to arrange that for me. So I was very, very excited and happy that it would go ahead. And I was also very grateful to Anne that she facilitated that, and I took it on and then made it happen, really. That call did take place in January 24, but I'm going to talk about it in the next episode of the podcast, episode 42, but also reflecting on 2024 and what happened after that call, because I did redraft the piece. I went to various production companies, and I met Richard Gadd. But how, when, in what circumstances? It's quite interesting. So that's what's coming in the next podcast episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay well, stay safe, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye for now.